So, Dame Stella Rimington, many congratulations on receiving your honorary doctorate from the University of Warwick. How does it feel?
Well, it feels great actually. I've got. It's not the first honorary doctorate that I've got, but I feel always a wonderful sort of sense of being part of something, because you get your honorary doctorate at a graduation ceremony, and there in the hall are all kinds of young people from all over the world who've worked terribly hard, to get their degrees, and this is their day, and they're actually, getting the scroll in their hands, and sitting where I sit, knowing that I'm getting something that I haven't actually sat down and worked for, except I suppose during the whole of my life in a way. It's really heartwarming, and you feel that you're sort of part of the younger generation and sharing just for a moment in the beginning of something as they leave here and go off and start their careers in the world.
And many of those people who are graduating today have studied the intelligence agencies in relation to politics and international affairs, and that's one of our key research areas with Richard Aldrich and Chris Moran, who gave the oration today. And also the technical aspects of cybersecurity. We have a cybercrime unit here at the university. How important, speaking as a former Director General of MI5, how important do you feel the study is of the intelligence services and the openness of that study to the world today?
I think it's vitally important, actually, because, the whole sort of history of my career in the intelligence services has been of moving out of the shadows. When I joined, nobody knew really anything about British intelligence, certainly didn't know who they were, what they did, and nobody knew how you joined. And in fact, joining was by tapping people on the shoulder, and it was all a deep mystery. Now, I think it's really the situation has enormously improved with greater openness and an effort to make sure that people actually understand what intelligence services do to protect them, and broadly how they do it. And that they're not some kind of, weird, covert part of government that nobody can possibly talk about. They're there to serve the people. And I think studying these organisations, as you do at this university, is great. And that's one reason why I was so pleased to get this honorary degree here today, because of this specialisation in the study of intelligence and the political aspects of that.
And you were the first Director General to be publicly named. You played a very key role in opening the public awareness of the service and opening out as much as possible what could be presented to the public of what the service does. You say also as well, we still almost think of the spy world as taps on the shoulder and all that sort of thing. It's now an open recruitment process a lot of the time. What misconceptions do you still think maybe those 21-year-olds graduating today have? And what do you want to sort of, allay their fears, and sort of, if they were thinking after your speech today of actually entering into the intelligence agencies, what sort of advice would you give?
Well, I would tell them to forget everything that they've seen in the James Bond film, because it is not remotely any part of British intelligence like that. And I would also say, if they've ever watched that programme Spooks on BBC television that was on a few years ago, forget that as well, because that portrayed particularly MI5 as being a group of about 5 people who went out every day and solved some hideous problem and came back successful. It's not like that at all. British intelligence is a complex structure of, there are primarily 3 main intelligence services, MI5, MI6 and GCHQ, and the police, which I think is another very important aspect of keeping us safe. And these intelligence services nowadays work incredibly closely together, gathering intelligence on the threats to the country, whether they come from abroad or whether they're domestically generated, and working closely with the police to try and prevent harm coming from people, terrorists, people who are plotting to do horrible things. And I think that's what people need to understand, that if they join any part of British intelligence, what they're going into is a team of people who put all their different resources and skills together in order to achieve the success, which means that the bomb does not go off, the person's not shot, and we don't lose the secrets. So that's something to remember. It is a family, basically. And it needs to be, because the other thing you've got to remember if you go into an intelligence service is that it's quite difficult to have the kind of ordinary social life that most people take for granted. And that is definitely seen, I think, by young people as a bit of a negative. You can't talk to your friends about the wonderful job you've got because you're told, just not to bruit it around that you've joined one of the intelligence services. So there are pluses and minuses, but most people get an enormous amount of satisfaction from knowing that they're doing really important work and that they're at the heart of what's going on in the nation.
And you were talking about those teams of people working in MI5, MI6, CCHQ, and we've seen recently talking about openness again, sort of a desire to recruit, first of all, more women into the service, and second of all, people with STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Obviously, as the first female DG, on one part, do you feel it's important to have those female role models, such as yourself and Eliza Manning and Buller, in sort of leading a way into the intelligence services? And also, what do you feel about sort of the need for those people from those different types of education backgrounds going into the service? Because you yourself, you studied English.
I did, yes.
And archives. Which is not necessarily the route we expect as someone who ends up leading MI5. So what do you feel about sort of the need for female role models and sort of those pioneers in those other areas of research?
Yes. Well, I think it's extremely important in the intelligence services, just as in companies and organisations of all kinds, to have diversity. So male, female, ethnic minority background, whatever. Because I think that no organisation nowadays will prosper if it doesn't have a variety of approaches, a variety of different kinds of people from different backgrounds, able to apply their background and their knowledge to complex situations. And particularly in my form service, which of course is the thing I know most about, it's vital, for example, if you are trying to collect intelligence from human beings, who are still a very important source of intelligence, even in today's technological world, you need to have a variety of people so that you can choose the right person to approach the person that you're trying to approach. And if you've got men, women, people often say to me, are women better at spying than men? And the answer is no. They're different. And you need both sorts of approach. So I do think it's very important, and particularly, of course, because we've still got to combat the image of James Bond, and that's, even though it's nonsense, it's still there, and we need to explain, that this is a multicultural, both-sex organisation. So that part I think is very important. And I also think it's very important that we have people from all kinds of educational backgrounds, not just the classical, classics and history and all that, which traditionally it was. Because now espionage, counter-espionage, all sorts of security work is very much dependent on up-to-date modern technology, and particularly understanding new communications technologies. And cyberspace, as we've already said, is one of the current threats to our security.
And thinking about current events, you and I are in a fairly unique situation where the rest of the world is currently watching the inauguration of the 45th president, and here we are in a room where we've got no idea what's going on in the outside world. So I believe whilst we've been speaking, Donald Trump has just become the 45th president.
Right.
We know there's been a fraught relationship between both President Obama and now President Trump regarding the FBI and the CIA in recent weeks. What's it like, from your position, to actually have to tell a world leader of an incoming threat, an imminent threat? Because you were DG during the time of John Major as Prime Minister.
I was, yes.
How is it to actually have to make that call, to make that sort of decision, to brief them on something that's developing?
Well, it depends on the Prime Minister, quite frankly. John Major I think, was the perfect Prime Minister, because I used to have to go and say, Prime Minister, there's an IRA lorry bomb coming in. We know that it's coming in. We don't know when it's coming in, where it's coming in, what the target is. But Prime Minister, I thought you should know. And he was perfect, because he just used to close his eyes and lean back in his chair and say, "Oh well, Stella, do your best." And that was perfect, because we did our best, and very often those bombs never went off because we managed to get sufficient intelligence in a timely way to stop it. So what you don't want in a prime minister, it seems to me, if you're head of an intelligence service, is somebody who's going to panic. You want somebody with a good enough background knowledge of the situation of what's going on and confidence in the intelligence services and the police and the people who actually have to deal with the situation on the ground. Because the worst thing is to have somebody who's going to start rushing around and panicking. The situation with Donald Trump, I think, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. I mean, we've heard all the things he said about he doesn't think much of his intelligence services and he doesn't want a daily briefing and all those things. But it seems to me that he's put somebody quite sensible actually in charge of the CIA. So one can only infer from that he does think it's important and that he's chosen somebody who he thinks will be good at holding the position, of being in charge. How, I think nobody knows how he's going to react when he is president, and whether the man we've seen on the campaign trail is going to turn out to be the president or whether he's going to be completely different. I think there's a lot to wait and see, and it's quite a sort of tense and exciting time.
And on that note of anticipation, Dame Stella Rimington, many congratulations again, and thank you for being here at the University of Warwick.
Thank you very much.